Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
I know, first time, right? Turn on. Yeah. You excited?
Yeah. Excited.
She's nervous like you were yesterday.
I know.
We do have mine.
We tested them out.
We tested them. We're like,
I was gonna say
years ago. I know, I was bragging about it. I was like, I've had it for years.
Yeah.
And the buttons.
Yes. Test. Okay. Test. You got. Like, is he a little goofy? Well.
We ready?
You ready? Yeah. Okay. So thank you for everybody for coming. I'm excited to have Daisy here. We kind of already all introduced each other. Yeah, I'm excited. Daisy's going to talk about her exhibition, Bound by Nothing. And what did I say? Oh, Daisy's originally from Michigan.
I'm born in Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota. That's what it was. Yeah.
And I have lived here in Georgia essentially my whole life. Our family moved down here when I was less than a year old. So I consider myself a native.
Yeah,
I feel like
think it'll be that
counts.
long. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your Bound by Nothing. Can you explain how you got to the title of your exhibition?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bound by Nothing is really about exploring limitations and pushing beyond those limitations. Obviously, because my paintings move off the canvas and onto the frames, I feel like it's literally expanding beyond the framework, so to speak, a literal framework of how we see life and how we see potential and possibilities. So it's really about encouraging inspiration and creating hope and just pushing beyond of what we know into something greater.
Mm-hmm. So how would you see the relationship in between the hope, the beginnings, and all, like in your work with that of the life?
How I see the relationship between the cycle of life.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
That's
yeah. It's like a cycle, yeah.
So I think the cycle of life, death, and rebirth is something that I continually visit that in my work. And it's something that I've noticed over time, kind of how we were discussing, like the longer you create, the more commonalities you see in your work. And that cycle of life, death, and rebirth, or new beginnings, I think it is always there in my work. And I think it's something that it's kind of, everyone has that fascination with it, because we all like the idea of a fresh start and a new beginning and new life. And I think those second chances are something that we hold really dear to us.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you want your viewers to have with the emotion of that? Like, you have the emotions of these, and what do you want your viewers to get out of that emotion?
I hope that people have a sense of inspiration when they see my work, that they're inspired to think beyond what their limitations might be. And I think what's really neat about that is that it's different for every person. Everyone is struggling with a certain set of limitations, whether it's self-imposed or culturally imposed or otherwise. But I think that's where the unique viewer perspective comes in too. And I'm able to make that connection, I think, with people with that.
Yeah, and then you have in your, like, you talk a lot about the loss, brokenness, and the resilience of your collection. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I think that salvaging my materials speaks a lot to the resilience and creating something out of loss or brokenness. And again, that idea of second chances and new beginnings. it started with salvaged paints and moved into other materials. I've salvaged fabrics like lace and papers and moved into the frames. And I think that giving new life to those materials that were discarded or neglected and forgotten about, it speaks to not only a second chance, but resilience and something new and creating something new out of something old.
And how do you hold the balance of when you refurbish, fix it, or change up? Like, how do you balance the beauty of the old and the antique and then put it in something new?
I think that's something that is different for each piece that I'm working on. With the frames in particular, my aim was to make sure that they're sturdy and that they're structurally sound and foundational. But a lot of the patina and the little chips and cracks and, the randomness that age gives them and the life that they've had before I came across them is really beautiful. And I really wanted to leave as much of that untouched as possible, and did for the most part. Yeah.
And what role does the imperfection of the piece, not the piece, the frame and the flaws play a role into your artwork? Like,
I think it speaks that there's so much beauty in imperfection and that we are imperfect and that there's something to really embrace and accept that about ourselves and love in each other too. And I think it's the beauty that's in imperfection. I think that's very simply put, I think
so too, yeah. And do you have like one piece? Can you walk us through one piece you like the most and go through the process and like the specific of it?
Yeah. A little bit? I don't know if I have a favorite piece, but one particular piece where the process was really fun for me was Wash, which is in this front room here, where the lower portion is painted pink. And what was really fun about that is that it started out like this one. I planned for it to be just black ink. And I worked through the ink and the pattern that's on there several times over and over and kind of kept getting frustrated with it. And I washed it off with a sprayer in my bathtub and just completely washed it off and rubbed as much ink off of it as I could. And the ink that's on there that you see is what was left that I couldn't wash off. And for me, it was, I don't know, it was very cathartic. It was very much about the whole process of the whole series of that, fresh start, new beginning, and starting over and literally washing off as much of that as I could and working with what was left. And I think because of that, that's one of my most favorite pieces, but I don't think I have a favorite.
Yeah. And then you have in your art here, and how you set it up, it has a cycle. So can you go over so everybody knows what that meaning is with it?
So when I planned the series, it started with this one behind me, which is Learning to Breathe. And it's, it's black and white. It's very primal. It's very visceral. It's very raw. And of course, there's no color in it. Then as we move into the next one, which is Wash, it's kind of, again, like that starting over beginning point of something new that you're going to grow and nurture. And as you move through the pieces in here, there's Catching, which is on the very end, which feels like it's just kind of nesting or dripping. It reminds me of a beehive in a lot of ways, but it's like cocoon and there's something there kind of growing and ebbing. And then we move through the smaller pieces, which I feel like have a flow to them. And then we have that movement kind of coming in more, it kind of takes different shapes. Roots for me is finding which is the center green one, is kind of recentering yourself with who you really are. I think I might equate that to like diving into like your most true, authentic self and the roots of who you really are to expand and to grow more. And then the final piece is meant to be this, which is Secret Garden, which the title is very connected with the meaning of this piece, which is that that flourish of life after starting from scratch and going through that whole evolution and coming back full circle into being full of life and growth. And it's kind of the story of going through something very devastating, trying and challenging, and that evolution of working through it to come full circle again.
Gotcha. And then, so with that, when you said the titles, how do you pick your titles and how, because I know a little bit the story behind the titles and stuff. So if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
The Secret Garden, for me, I was thrilled when I came up with the title because I kind of struggled with it for a few days. And so that, not just the meaning of it and coming full circle into like this evolution of growth, but for me, the Secret Garden was a book that was my favorite book as a child. And there's a lot of carryover, I think, when I started thinking about that book and how she discovers this old forgotten garden that, you know, its glory days were gone and it was overgrown and full of weeds, and she saw potential in it. And it's, you know, it's a story of rebirth. It's a story of inspiration. It's a story of, you know, inspiring others that they can overcome things. And I just kind of got tickled with the irony of that being one of my most favorite books, and that theme that I loved so much as a child is here in my work.
Fitting,
you know, and I don't know, it's just one of those aha moments.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how is the music? I know that you do a lot with music and titles and in your studio.
Yeah.
So how does that influence you and with the mood and all that?
I think the rhythm that's in my work, the movement and the rhythm, has a lot to do with the music. I'm always listening to music when I'm working. And it's funny how they kind of deposit into my work and my brain while I'm working, and whether it's the rhythm and the movement in the painting itself, or it comes out in a title with the lyrics, or you know, some phrase in the song that seemed to really fit the mood of the painting when I was making it. But that's a huge inspiration for me. But
Jeffrey does that too with music.
yes, yeah, it does. It's a great muse.
Yeah. Do you change up, like, can you tell me, like, with the colors, how you pick the colors? Like, what is behind, like, that you have the bright behind here, and then you use green, and then you have the blues? Like, is that?
Yeah, I think, the colors is part of that story too, how we're moving into, you know, coming to full life, you know, from something just barren and basic. And the colors I wanted to convey a sense of life and new beginning. Green, obviously, like with Roots, is also green because I wanted that. I really wanted that feeling of growth to be there, and something rooting in and growing deep foundations. And the green is my favorite color. I named my daughter Jade. and so I have always been attracted to green, and ironically have not used a whole lot of it in my work, but it felt so appropriate for those pieces in particular. And that emerald green to me is just mesmerizing. So
I agree.
when I made Roots, I knew that this piece, because I hadn't made it yet, was going to be green.
And why did you pick the background for this then? Like, how was that just intuition?
I do think some of it is intuition, as far as just I wanted that green to really pop, but I also feel like it's a horizon of sorts. To me, it feels like a horizon, and a new beginning, like a new day.
Did you had any challenges with this collection too?
I think every artist does with any work of art. But very early on, I think I was letting a lot of the pressure get to me and kind of get in my own way, in my own head.
What kind of pressure do you mean with, like? doing the collection or
doing a new body of work, knowing it was going to be for a solo exhibition, you know, and really wanting to, you know, that pressure of really wanting to create something wonderful that I would be really proud of and say that this is some of the best work that I've created to date. And I absolutely do feel that way today.
I think so too. I think you crushed it on that one. It's beautiful. Well, I lost my other questions, but they are down there. But I know one. When you have some struggles and new beginnings and all of this. So if you have new artists, well, we have a couple in here. What would you tell them what they should work on, how they get inspired? Like, give me, like...
So advice I would give to young aspiring artists would be to always be authentically yourself, no matter the pressure of you making money, the pressure of you know, what everybody else is doing in the art world or wherever you are. Just be true to yourself, and as long as you're aligned with what you're doing to make yourself happy, I think the rest will come. And I would also say, as someone who had to take several detours from my art through life because of family and because of other, you know, just fundamental things I had to take care of, like providing for my family. That detours are okay. And that as long as you are doing something for you to nurture that in some capacity, and it may not be, you know, the full thriving, full-time artist career that you are wanting at some point, but I think to be patient and to understand that great things take time, and it just because it's a detour doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
Right. I think that's important to know, to not give up and just keep going.
Yeah.
And don't get distracted from other noises.
Yeah.
That's we talk about that a lot, that it's hard to not go into pressure, especially with the internet now, to get to that pressure. You know, all that. Let me check real quick because I lost this. Where's your ambition for your art in the future? Do you have already some projects or?
Yeah, I would. I definitely plan to play more with different substrates like paper. I did a few pieces on paper for this body of work, and I really want to play with that more.
So more like those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I not just paper, but I'd really like to incorporate fabrics at some point. And of course the frames I'm in love with. I have a love for thrifting and, you know, finding things.
Right, go into that. So if you guys don't know her, like how she find, like go through like.
So the frames are all salvaged from thrift stores, estate sales, garbage, things I've gotten for free from other artists, because they're like, oh, you're the artist who likes frames. I have some frames here. So I've gotten them all kinds of ways, but it started as like in thrift stores. I saw some frames that I liked, and I was like, man, these are awesome. Who would give these away? I'm going to use these, you know, because I love it.
So how long did it take you from finding those and then going to the style?
You know, it was actually pretty quick. I did a few that I found at a thrift store, and then it kind of just took on a life on its own. I had a friend reach out to me and say, hey, I know a guy who owns a salvage shop up in North Georgia, and he just got a whole bunch of these antique frames from some barn out in Ball Ground, and you should go check them out. And I did. And I went 3 different times and bought as much as I could afford on 3 different occasions, which wasn't a whole lot, but, you know, they were salvaged frames. They were broken, you know, so I fixed them up. And I mean, the frames that you see here in this body of work, I have been collecting for well over a year.
Mm-hmm. So you wait for it. So it, like, if you start a painting, do you know the frame, or you do how do you?
So I paint the painting first and then match it with the frame. I do dimensions that I know I have frames in. So if I have certain size frames and I'm like, okay, I have X number of, 24 by 36 or whatever. And so I know my dimensions that I'm working in, but then I don't necessarily know which one they're going to be paired with until it's done. And all of the paintings here were definitely like, there was a culling, right? There was lots of paintings, and then I picked my favorite to go with the frames. So like that particular frame might have had, I think, 3 or 4 that I painted that could fit in that frame, but there was one meant for it.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
So do you have anything you want to still share what I didn't ask with the... Before we open up the questions, you better have some questions ready.
I feel like I really touched on a lot of the main, points of this body of work and what I was, hoping to achieve. I think the overall resounding message in my work is hope. And that, regardless of how dilapidated and broken and forgotten anything can be, that there's hope for a new life and a new beginning.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So we open up the questions if anybody wants to. Yeah.
So before the abstractions, do you lead towards that like early on?
Abstract was actually something that I did not get into until 2020 during COVID. Yep, I was working in the ER as a nurse, because I'm a nurse, and worked through the entire pandemic. And before COVID, my work was like self-portrait narratives for the most part, and very much like in that vein of like Frida Kahlo, I think was probably my main inspiration. And so to go into abstract was a drastic change for me, but that year was so difficult, as it was for all of us, I think, that there was something in abstract that I could express that I couldn't in any other way. There was like an intangible, or what I was feeling and experiencing wasn't concrete enough for me to capture it with representational art anymore. And it was a huge shift in my style and in my art.
Is some of this from 20, or is this all fresh?
This is all very new, except for these 3 pieces. Those are probably a year or maybe 2 years at the most. So those are some of the oval one in particular is an earlier work of moving off into the frames.
So you said you paint them on your own without the frame.
Yeah.
And then you add the frame. So you paint onto the frame.
Yes.
So you're very good at finding where it needs to overflow and where it still needs to be bound by the frame. That's all intuition.
Yeah.
And you come in with teeny tiny paintbrushes and
Sometimes teeny tiny paintbrushes. For like little drips and little details, I will go in with paintbrushes, and then other ones like here, I used the same big brush that I used in the painting, because I really wanted some of those same brush marks to come up onto the frame. So it really just depends on how I want it to be on the frame. And a lot of that is just trying to find that balance, of where can this painting go that's not going to feel compositionally, I guess, like too heavy or too light in one place. So that does become very technical for me to find that balance.
Yeah, here you use 2 at the same time.
Yes, to get this huge wide mark here. Yeah.
And then I became a part of the piece.
Yes.
I had to hold a little bit.
I got it on her when I was getting it under the wall, and we got all over both of us. We had it on our face and our arms. Yeah.
So that white stroke is a brush, it's not your
Yes, that is a brush. Yeah. Now, in my earlier work where I made these types of marks with thick paint, like over there, but even there's some that are even earlier than that, that where I used my hands and my fingers to create those
So are
kind
those
of
the little
textural-
ones?
Yes,
With-
the little
yeah.
ones are pieces of those.
Those,
Yes.
I can see it.
Yes.
Yeah, and then
And-
when we done and you look around there, there are little ones. There you can see how she moves with the hands.
Yes, and like you can see the finger marks. And I have larger pieces that aren't here where you can see where it, like, you know, I took both hands and like moved the paint and created that texture with the paint.
I'm familiar with some artists who use them.
Yeah.
I can't believe
It's a giant brush.
It's amazing. I was like,
Yeah, it's one giant brush, and then I actually have joined more than one brush together too to make it even bigger.
any more questions?
And this may be an odd question, but what made you stick with acrylic versus?
For these, I think the flow of the paint is really what I loved. Like this is ink and acrylic. And I used fluid acrylics for most of these because especially when you mix it with water, it has a very inky, very high flow and high viscosity.
Okay. But you mentioned salvage paints as well. So
Yes.
you actually use other things like
Yes.
house paint.
Yes.
And things, right?
Yeah, especially in my earlier works, that was all salvaged house paints that I got from a commercial painter.
The big textured
Mhm,
ones.
the big textured ones. Yep,
So you two have a lot in common.
we do. Yes.
Yeah.
salvaging, saving.
Yes.
You must
Repurposing.
really sell.
No, we see potential. We see
That's
great
it.
potential.
Yeah. It's
That's
beautiful.
what you do.
It's beautiful when you see, like, especially you two in, like, salvaging, and you're like, man, so many people discard
Yeah.
still beautiful things. And you guys make it come to life again.
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, you're a collector, so, you know, I mean, you see the beauty in it. What made you fall in love with her pieces? Like,
I think some of the motion in them. I think the first ones I saw you did at like a winery that or one
Yeah.
Mhm.
and there was this massive piece on the wall that I'm still in love with. And it's just it's the movement in that piece, the colors and the way they blend and it's hopeful. Like when I look at it, I feel good. So I mean,
Thank you.
I think that's why I like them.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So you really just kind of jump in. By concept.
No, now I have
Some.
for some of these, especially for the backgrounds, when I was doing the backgrounds, I do sometimes take photos of them and digitally try to figure out what my next step is. But these ribbons, I guess, because I don't know what else to really call them. The ribbons in them are very intuitive, and I will often, it's not one mark and done. Sometimes it's like over and over and over and reworking that paint until I find that balance or that rhythm that moves me. And then that's where I stop that part of it and move on to the next part, which is the background.
Oh, you did the background after.
After.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I was just question
Yeah.
too.
Especially like on this one, I just love like
Yes.
the way it
Amazing.
feels like it's sitting on top of it and I'm just like surrounded by it. It's so neat.
Thank you. Yeah, so I did the ribbon first and masked it and then did the background. But that's why
What do you mask with?
liquid masking, like what you use in watercolors.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I was imagining all over it.
And then you're cutting.
Yeah. I thought about it and quickly was like, this is a lot of tape. I need
Where can I get
something
salvaged
better.
tape?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where
goodness, how is she? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
Do you have a set schedule?
Ooh.
No.
I'm inspired, I have to go paint.
I do have to plan time to be creative because of I still do nursing. And I'm technically part-time with nursing, so I work like 2 shifts a week. So those days, and they're 12-hour shifts, which quickly turns into like a 14-hour day. So those days are pretty much out for anything other than nursing. So I usually start with that, and the other days that I have left will plan accordingly, depending on my daughter's school schedule or, other commitments we have. But I try to block off just studio time that's not administrative work or, website or social media or anything. And it's just like studio time. That's worked best for me.
How do you, when you go find frames, you go out? That's like a hunt.
Yes.
How do you stop yourself for that?
It's hard. I've recently spent way too much money on frames.
Yeah, I see it on social media.
Thanks to this show. I'm like, I can buy more frames.
It's a beautiful show.
So I have quickly created another stockpile of frames already, because this used a lot of, especially my medium to smaller frames that I had.
Mm-hmm.
I still had some large frames, and then some commissions I was working on. But other than that, I had pretty much depleted my stock in frames. So I've been treasure hunting, which has been a lot of fun.
And when you frame, you glue the canvas.
Yes.
Then, right?
Yes, these are, and I do put that on my, my website with with my description of the art. I say they are permanently housed. They are not designed or meant to come out of the frames, and I mean they're also painted on there. So that idea of it being a frame to me no longer exists. That's part of the artwork, just like the canvas or wood panel or anything else would be. Like that is the art now, and it's pushing that concept.
So how do you work when you have commissions? Like if somebody comes at you, how do you when somebody
as far as the frames go?
No, not just the frames. Like somebody comes to you and say, I want to have a commission from you. But do you ask them questions that you get their feel, or how do you
So I usually I ask questions about what work they were drawn to or what type of, because I do have my more textural pieces that are very thick, high texture, and then I have more of these type pieces too. So I have a couple of different veins of work that I work in, but I start with the work that they're drawn to and what their ideas are. If it's, I have 2 commissions right now that include frames, the antique frames, and it's really up to the collector as far as I have sent pictures of the frames that I have. And
so the frames come first?
Yes, it can be.
Okay.
So I have had some collectors are very particular about the type of frame. Like they want a particular type of gold or I guess tone of gold, or they really like the thickness of the frame as opposed to a thinner frame. Or some people really like the linen inserts in the frames.
Okay.
So it kind of start there. And for recent commissions, I've had more specific, specifications from the collector as far as what type of frame they want. And so I've gone out and looked specifically for those frames, and gone that way. And what's great is I recently found a gallery that will cut down frames for me. So if I find a frame that maybe is too big, I can cut it down to be the size that it needs to be, which has been great.
And then how do you get the painting with it then? So they pick the frame and they're specific, but how do you get to the piece? Like
It's just there. So the two,
it's so fluid.
so like one commission I'm working on now, they like the black and the white. So it's going to be an ink commission, and it's very much in my control. It is intuitive. It's what I want to do. But the frame is really the most specific. But the size and the frame are probably the most specific parts of that, and the rest is pretty much creative license and freedom, which is what I think every artist would want. But
right. Do you have the opposite, that they are really particular sometimes with the painting?
That hasn't, that for this, I mean, of course, yeah, people get very specific and they want a certain feel to things, but,
Emily?
Oh, it's
No.
not me.
Oh.
Yeah, just walk through some experiences.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, I think any artist who takes commissions has had experiences where it's a very specific vision that they're working with. And so far I've been able to nail all of them. Some I've had, a couple tries to get, but I think it was worth it in the end. But it's really, commissions are really about, for me, when I do commissions, it's taking my work and my message and, just making it a little more specified to like a size.
Gotcha.
Or, maybe a color palette, because they might say, I really love that turquoise. And I would really love that same turquoise and, whatever.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So it's a two-part question.
Yes.
You said that you listen to music
Yes.
while you paint. For what genre of music or band do you particularly like to listen to, and
I love all kinds of music, and I'm definitely one of those people who listens to the same song over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like I'll fall in love and obsess over a song or a certain musician or an album and just listen to it on repeat. And it probably drives my whole house nuts. But some examples, like Kings of Leon. I love classic rock. Hosier, who I recently saw in concert, which was phenomenal. Yeah, it was amazing. I guess like the thing with me in music is soulful music. Like it's music that moves me. So that's it. It's not really a certain genre. It's either I connect with the lyrics or the message or the actual like feel of the soulfulness of the song. So yeah, it's a great range, but that's, I guess, some quick examples. I was listening to a lot of Rolling Stones when I was making this body of work. So I don't know. That was kind of different. I've always loved the Rolling Stones, but for some reason I was just on a kick.
There you go.
So there's antique looking frames.
Yes.
Does that affect? Like you won't touch them.
So I have had some recent where the frames were like 24 karat gold and antique, and I was like, no, I don't want to paint on those. But other than that, it's what I'm after is I want something that has some wear and some age to it, and that is like
It lives.
battered, like it has some character to it. But yeah, I've kind of gotten, not intentionally, but like I've tried to tread lightly because I am by no means an expert in antique frames or the value of them. And so that's why I stick to things like estate sales, and I would never go, or I should never say never, right? I don't see myself buying some really expensive antique frame to use for my work, because I think the message that I'm after isn't there with that, as opposed to
Yes.
when I'm finding these, not yet.
Right?
But I mean, yeah, if someone was like, hey, I have this awesome antique frame and I want you to paint something for it, that would be different, you know. But I think for me, part of part of the process of the art is finding these frames. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure some of them aren't. A good majority of these were part of the ones that were salvaged from a barn up in Ball Ground, Georgia, and it was an art dealer who had retired in the I guess she was most active in the 1970s ish, and retired and had all these frames from her career and put them out in a barn on her property, and then they just sat there.
A lot of time cleaning.
Yes, and repairing them. And I mean, some of them were in really, really rough shape. And there was a lot. I got a lot of satisfaction out of that. You know, like taking something that had literally been sitting in a barn covered in God knows what for how many decades, and like cleaning it and, you know, tacking, you know, new nails into it, and like really some of them rebuilding structurally. I still have one at home where there's an edge that I can't quite get sturdy enough to use. And
You're trying to figure out yourself.
yeah, I try to, I mean, I have basic carpentry skills just that my dad has taught me and that I've learned over the years. But a lot of the like repairs and you know, restoration that I've put into these frames has been self-taught and kind of trial by fire.
Mhm. Yeah. Anything from the new artists and interns you guys want to know? I know maybe you get a little shyer.
You said when you're inspired to work on a piece, are you normally inspired by an emotion or more by a thought or how you're feeling?
That's a really good question. I think my experiences in life are a never-ending inspiration for my work, and you know, I think a lot of my paintings about loss and new beginnings, especially this past year, were about my divorce and having to restart my life again as a single parent and navigate waters I'd never imagined navigating. And so, you know, in that part becomes very personal, but I don't think that I don't think it's so specific that people can't relate to having to start over or having to start from scratch and kind of like relearn life, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it can be with losing a job,
Yeah.
being sick,
Yeah.
losing a family member,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, any
something.
number of things. And I mean, I think, you know, a lot of my earlier work were things that I was dealing with, you know, as a child and teenager that, you know, hadn't really processed in an adult, matured mind. And, you know, I think, you know, it's the same struggles that we all kind of go through. But yeah, I think my life is going to be a constant inspiration for my work. I'm just too emotional of a person to not have it spill into my work constantly.
What I love on your work is, so you say it's a lot with working through challenging and stuff, but every piece doesn't show sadness or
Yeah.
like it's very like
It's-
not just hope, it's like uplifting.
Yeah.
And yes, I can do this, and like it's very powerful that way, instead of, you know, some people get really
Yeah.
moody and like
Yeah.
sad and dark, and even like the darker ones are really light and open and even if they compact.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, I think that's very intentional because I think it's very easy to, and I know from my own experience, it's very easy to kind of go into those dark cycles or downward spirals. And I do lots of things to intentionally, reinforce my spirit and my fortitude and, make it more of a positive thing for myself. And that's part of the, the hope that I think that I want my work to give. And
certainly does, yeah.
Thank you. And that uplifting feeling is very intentional because it's speaking to myself too. It's, it's kind of like that friendly self reminder of like, things are going to get better. Things were, that self-encouragement, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely comes out.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think it's good to experience your emotions, not necessarily marinate them into so long that you lose your own flavor and you become the flavor of whatever feeling you're in.
Yeah. That's good.
So.
Yeah.
I
Awesome.
always say what I need.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what brings the feeling. My emotions are pouring into it, and at the same time, it's pouring back.
Yeah.
into me.
And I think it's a really wonderful like tool for self-reflection too, because like I've definitely painted work where in the moment I thought it was about one thing, and then years later I look back and I'm like, that wasn't about that. And it's like a way to like really, I think some emotions are really difficult to break down, and there's something about painting that helps me break it down, even if it's years later. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, that's what that was about.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just happens that way. Sometimes it's the moment I paint it, I know what it's about. Sometimes it's years later.
Awesome. Now having an outlet like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No? Okay. Can walk around a little bit and be a little loose.
Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. This was wonderful.
Thank you for all the great questions.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
being here.
Was this your first?
Yeah, it's my first artist talk.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, first solo, first artist talk.
I got another question. How nervous or intimidating was it when you got your first solo?
Pretty intimidating, like especially like at the beginning when I started creating the work, like that it was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of pressure. And then, I had a couple of nights where I was up all night working and just worked through it. I don't know how. I think if I knew how, I would write a book and sell it.
You did great.
But
you did amazing.
Somehow worked through it. It was a lot. It was a lot of sleepless nights, and then I don't know. I guess maybe that's what a breakthrough is. But it eventually came. I think at some point I just put aside that pressure, right? And the expectations, the boundaries, and the limits that we put on ourselves, which is the whole message.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you guys.
thank you.
Let's walk around a little bit and shake it out.
Like my mouth is so dry. Yes.
Good job. Get out of the way.